This podcast contains detailed plot spoilers, adult language, and mature themes. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to a podcast of rare antiquities, episode 19. Today we go back in time to the time of 1950s Hollywood, where men were men and women were secretaries or crazy. We're going to talk about the 1950 classic, Sunset Boulevard. Harry, welcome back to the show, man. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to be back on the show, deconstructing these classics. So, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. We haven't covered any films from this time period before. So let me ask you, did you have any awareness of this film before? I think you said you had never seen it, right?
I had not seen it, no. The interesting thing here is that for some reason I feel I've seen bits and pieces of it in my memory, and maybe pictures of, I think her name is Gloria Swanson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember seeing her, and I think the last shot of the movie where she we won't ruin it, but just the last shot of her in the movie.
Yeah.
I've seen before.
Okay. Yeah. It's a pretty iconic shot, I think. I can tell you about, my history with this film. It's a little bit long, but I remember many years ago, at least 10 years ago, maybe more, maybe 15 years ago, I got this film as a Christmas gift on DVD from an uncle of mine, and, not particularly close family member. And I'm not typically a fan of older black and white films. It's not really my wheelhouse. There's the odd one here and there. So I opened this up and I looked at it and I'm like, what the hell is this? And just kind of cast it off into a pile. I didn't even take the shrink wrap off. It just got thrown on a shelf somewhere and it sat there for years. And I think I had the wrong idea about what this movie was about. I thought it was just some old romance movie or something in black and white. I didn't really give a shit. And then at some point, many years later, I can't remember who it was. It might have been my dad or somebody else had brought it up, and maybe they saw it on my shelf or something and started talking about what an awesome movie it was. I'm like, whatever. But then once I heard more about it and what it was about, I'm like, all right, I'll give this one a go. And so I finally watched it after many years of owning it and, in its original packaging, and finally watched it. And, we don't want to give away too much of what I thought about the movie, but it managed to make the cut here anyway. So that's kind of my history with the film there. We can get into it. Do you have any thoughts or any comments before we jump into Sunset Boulevard, Harry?
No, I'm glad that we're visiting, going back into the 50s, black and white movies, our first one. Yeah, I just know of Gloria Swanson's history herself.
Yeah, okay.
I kind of remember reading a long time ago that she had some dalliances, or she was wasn't she a pretty famous silent movie star too? So I think this movie kind of plays into, it's almost like a partial autobiography of her.
Yeah, and in casting this role, they were definitely looking for somebody who embodied that character, who had been obviously around and had been in some silent films, which we can I'll get into with the trivia. But yeah, that was definitely, they looked at a few actresses who would have fit in that role, a little bit older, at least by Hollywood standards, who had been in the silent film era, but sort of fell out of favor later on. So. Yeah, she's pretty famous for sure, or was at the time.
Yeah, and I think I remember that's something to do with, I think she had, I can't remember if I'm wrong, she obviously didn't date JFK, but that family member is or something like that, because I remember her name coming up in some history books or something related to the Kennedys. I can't recall, so I thought maybe you're doing the trivia.
We'll get to her, a little bit of biographical information about her as we progress here. But why don't we run right into this guy? Sunset Boulevard. A body floats in the pool in the 10,000 block of Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood, California. He has 3 bullets in his body, and police and media swarm the scene. The disembodied voice of Joe Gillis offers to tell us the story before it all gets blown out of proportion in the newspapers. Let's go back 6 months. There's Joe, the man who will end up perforated and floating in a pool in 6 months, banging away at his typewriter, cranking out original stories that just don't sell. The buzzer sounds and Joe finds a couple of repo men here to take back his car. Seems he's behind on his payments. He weaves a little story. The car isn't here, something about a friend driving it down to Palm Springs. But he better come up with the $290 he owes in back payments, or there's going to be fireworks. Once the repo guys leave, Joe heads across the street to a parking lot behind a shoe shop. Here's his car. He jumps in and heads to the Paramount lot, where he has a script kicking around. He needs to get paid, and fast. Inside the office of studio executive Sheldrake, Joe pitches his story about pitches. Baseball pitches, in fact. Some bullshit about some gangsters and betting, and, well, it sounds like a lot of nonsense, but he gets his secretary on it. Young Betty Schaefer rolls in with a 2-page synopsis on the script. It sucks. Joe and Betty exchange some zippy dialogue before Joe tells her where to stick it, and Sheldrake tells him he's out of luck. You know it's the 50s when Joe heads to his local writer's hangout, a drugstore, to pump nickels into a public phone booth, trying to get a hold of anyone and everyone who might be able to help him out of his bind. Finally tracks down his good-for-nothing agent and meets him at the golf course, but instead of a loan or a lead on some work, his agent tells him that the best motivation for cranking out a great script is an empty stomach. Joe's prospects have added up to 0. He rages down the highway, out of control and looking for a disaster. It's either sell all his junk and move back to Ohio, or as he rounds a corner, he blows a tire. He pulls into a long driveway to assess the damage and finds a decrepit old mansion and a nice big garage to store his car in. The place is overgrown with wild plants. It's an empty pool and no one to be seen. Yet a voice calls out to him from the second floor behind a blind. He can't make out the figure, but a butler appears at the door, ushering him inside. Feeling that he has stumbled upon a scene that he would rather have absolutely nothing to do with, he tries to explain his way out, but simply gets ushered upstairs to meet aging silent film star Nora Desmond. She carries the force of a hurricane with her, something about her overstated style and sharp voice. When she starts talking about a coffin, and Joe sees a figure beneath a shroud on the table, he approaches slowly, and Norma draws back the shroud to reveal a fucking monkey. A dead goddamn chimpanzee. Well, Joe's not getting any deeper into this, so he tells her, she's got the wrong guy, and she tells him to get lost, and he's all good with that, except, say, she looks kind of familiar. It is Norma Desmond. Yeah, she's none too happy that people actually use words and shit in the movies now. Well, Joe, he's just a writer, not an executive, so he'll be on his way. And Norma's like, wait, you're a writer? And Joe's like, yeah, a bad one. And Norma's like, well, come have a look at something. In the living room, piles of paper have taken over. Norma's written a script herself, the greatest of all time, and it will be her grand return to the silver screen. And since Joe has nothing better to do and he's lying low anyway, he agrees to sit down and read this monstrosity. He reads it well into the night, Norma staring at him the whole time, and in a grand display of reverse psychology, he finds his next paycheck. He will patch up this mutated monster of a script for a fee, but he just bit off more than he can chew, as Norma will not let him leave with it. So here he must stay day and night to complete his work. Effectively held captive, Joe reworks the script half the time and spends the other half joining Norma and indulging in the memories of a forgotten age of cinema. It's all like a dream, an oddity of existence that's like a rotting piece of flesh still attached to the body. But at least it pays the bills. Norma decks Joe out in all the finest clothes and the finest cool cigarette holders and even gets him a tuxedo for New Year's Eve. And the main hall is all decked out for a grand celebration. A small orchestra plays off to the side, the dance floor is all waxed up, and it looks like the butler stole the buffet table from Hogwarts. Joe rolls up in his new tux, Norma in her high-style evening dress, and the two start dancing the night away. Only, things seem a little lonely, don't they? Joe wonders when the other guests will arrive. It's already past 10, and Norma's like, guests? What are these guests you speak of? Tonight, it's just the two of us. Turns out Norma's been in love with Joe all along. They argue a bit. Joe's freaked out and needs to get out of there. He runs out into the pouring rain. December in California, and hitches a ride into town to his friend Artie's apartment. It's filled with New Year's celebration joy. It's wall-to-wall in there with a lively young crowd that Joe no longer belongs to. He makes arrangements with Artie to crash there for a couple weeks, and even has a brief run-in with Artie's new girlfriend, Betty, the young studio secretary who told him the script was a pile of crap. But after a second volley of witty dialogue, Joe is summoned back to the mansion. Turns out Norma has slit her wrists. But she's alive, and now Joe is trapped for good. Later on in summer, the old mansion is looking like it got a haircut and hit the gym. The lawn is mowed, and even the old pool is back in working order. Life looks good, but in reality, Joe's getting bored. A chance encounter at a drugstore with Artie and Betty reveals a new opportunity for Joe. An old script of his made the rounds and the studio is interested. Joe says he's retired, but in the back of his mind, he still feels the pull of that typewriter. At the mansion, someone from Paramount Studios keeps calling for Norma. Finally, someone wants the script, and it's time to get down there right away to get to work. She gathers Joe into the car and commands the butler to get them to the studio right away to speak with famed director Cecil B. DeMille. When they get to the studio, it quickly becomes apparent to everyone but Norma that her time has passed. The studio was never interested in her script or in her comeback. She has trouble taking the hint, however, and is convinced that the shoot is imminent. She gets herself on a diet and beauty regimen to prepare for filming, while Joe secretly meets with Betty at the studio in the evenings. The two are collaborating on a script and are making eyes at each other. He pushes her away, so they keep working night after night while Norma continues her beauty treatment. She knows he's been sneaking away and one night finds the script the two have been working on. Betty confesses to Joe that Artie wants her to move to Arizona with him, but she doesn't want to go. She confronts him at the mansion, but he describes his life as a live-in prostitute and isn't willing to slum it as a starving artist again. Betty's heart is broken, and Joe shows her the door. But he's not staying either. He packs up his things. His old things, not his tailored suits, custom shoes, or platinum cufflinks, just his ratty old sport coat and polo shirt, and he makes for the door. Norma tries to make him stay. She needs him for the picture, and he drops the bombshell. There is no picture. It's all in her mind. Chasing him out the door, she brandishes a pistol. A single shot rings out. Then another, and another. Down Joe falls into the pool. Norma's mind is gone. It's all just a movie now, and she's ready for her close-up. The end. All right. Well, that's Sunset Boulevard, Harry. So just taking a look at the story, the plot, what are your initial thoughts?
No, it's a good story. What's interesting to me is a couple things. Like, it's, for some reason, even through your synopsis, it screams and oozes classic retro Hollywood. You know, not just because it's dealing with a screenwriter and he's, dealing with the studios themselves, but this just feels like something that came out of that era. It fits right in. This kind of story, a very small, personal story, it centers around ego and vanity.
Yeah.
And that's, obviously they both have egos and they both have vanity. I mean, more so obviously with Norma Desmond character than Joe, but that's just something that hit me when I watched the movie, and I also got through your synopsis, and I'll leave it at that. I'll mention more of my thoughts as we progress through the episode.
Yeah, sounds good. There's that's interesting that you say about the place. The film sort of places it directly in that time, and I think that'll probably become an interesting topic as we move along. But let's pause for a couple of neat little details about Sunset Boulevard. So this movie was released in 1950. It had a budget of about $1.7 million at the time, and ended up.
That's surprising. 1.7 million.
Yeah. So certainly not a small production. It grossed $5 million approximately worldwide. I mean, numbers are hard to come by for movies of this era, but that would certainly be considered a success. It, in fact, had many nominations, won Academy Awards for best writing, best art direction, and best music. It was also nominated for best picture, best actor, best actress in both the supporting and leading roles, for both nominated for best director, cinematography, and editing. So It certainly was. What's that?
Full slate.
Full slate. It's one of only a few films in history that has been nominated in all of those categories, which are basically considered all of the major film categories. So certainly well received critically and commercially. This film stars William Holden in the lead male role as Joe Gillis, Gloria Swanson as Norma Desmond, and both of these figures certainly had prolific careers. William Holden has over 70 acting credits to his name. Fairly famous. I mean, he didn't do a whole lot of note after this, but he did continue working right up to his death in 1981. but he was in lots of famous stuff. For example, he was in The Wild Bunch. He was in the original Casino Royale, the spoof of the Bond films back in 1967.
That's probably maybe the only other movie I've probably seen him in.
I mean, he's in a lot of stuff, and The Bridge in the River Kwai again.
He's in that one too. That's right.
So certainly a very prolific career. Gloria Swanson, she's an interesting character. She began her film career over 100 years ago in silent films, some uncredited appearances, many short films. And again, this film here, was sort of her comeback attempt, if you will. This is a 1950 film, Sunset Boulevard. She did not work all that much after Sunset Boulevard. She does have a few appearances here and there, but she was known to not really enjoy the business anymore. And she lived to age 84. She died in 1983. And just many credits to her name. The other interesting figure here, we get a very famous cameo from legendary director Cecil B. DeMille.
Cecil or Cecil?
I don't know. It's one of the two. What did they say in the movie? Was it Cecil?
I thought it's Cecil, but I'm not sure.
Oh, give me some seltzer. I need some seltzer.
Yes.
Mr. DeMille was is nothing less than a Hollywood legend.
Maybe that's where all the 1.7 million budget went. Just getting him on board for a cameo.
Yeah, could well. His cameo was reportedly $10,000 that they had to pay him, and when the director needed to do some reshoots, he asked for another $10,000. So and you see how short his cameo actually is. I mean, it's a speaking cameo for sure, and it's kind of a nice metafictional casting of a real director in this role who would have been that guy. So I thought that was pretty.
And then I guess now that we're even just talking about DeMille, I think it goes back to that point I mentioned before. This seems like not just fitting in this era, but this seems like a movie that Hollywood made for Hollywood, for the studios made for the studios.
Yeah.
In that sense, it's almost like a private little film for themselves that they released to the public.
Yeah, and yet is extraordinarily critical of the business in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But getting back to DeMille, a couple of interesting things I noted. He has 80 director credits to his name going all the way back to 1914. He directed the Ten Commandments in 1923, and then directed the remake of the Ten Commandments in 1956, the Charlton Heston version. Among other things, The Greatest Show on Earth. Lots of those old sort of grand films from that age of Hollywood. And he was also a very prolific producer, as a producer on a lot of his own films, as well as many others. World of Worlds, for example, he worked on that. Samson and Delilah. He was a writer. He appeared as a narrator and actor in some things. Again, there was really nothing that this guy didn't do. He was a giant in Hollywood. I don't know that there's a modern day comparison to this guy. So
Michael Bay.
Yeah, writer, director, producer, actor. Michael Bay still holds the top spot for greatest cameo of all time, I think. So
yes, the Brewskis.
Yeah, dude, can we bring the Brewskis? greatest ever. I wanted to talk a bit about the opening here for a couple reasons. So I always find it fascinating how the opening credits in all these old films, and I don't know when it switched. They do all of the credits up front, the title, the cast, and they do all the crew and everybody like that, as opposed to the end of the film, which is customary, of course, in recent times. But it sure took a lot less guys to make a film. The credits don't last for 12 minutes like they do on the big movies nowadays.
No.
But I saw.
Do you remember Jaws? At the end of that thing, that when you just see the shot of the beach and the cove, it's literally like 10 names pop up and that's the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like the cast and crew. It's like some guys that I rounded up on the street and they hopped my van. we made that shark movie. And and nowadays, like, I went to Captain America on the weekend, and the credits are like 14 minutes long, and it's the entire population of South Korea, everybody who ever lived in California ever. And like, I think my name was in that credits. Like, everybody's in that, involved in that. It's just, it's crazy how things have changed over the decades here. You know, I mean, it's not recognizable even.
Could also be possible that maybe the people that they, back in those days, it could be like a rights issue, like employee rights, like maybe certain employees who even did work on the films or crews or certain trades, those guys didn't get recognition on the movie. Like, they might be on the books, but they're not recognized on screen. Whereas I think due to unions and development of employee rights and such, I think that's where people, you know, those movements happened, rightfully so. And through those developments now, every single person who had any hand in the movie, they get their name on the credits.
Yeah, that's quite likely. Yeah, that's probably true. So, I did like the opening music here. It's got some ominous tones to it, but very classical fare, very old fashioned Hollywood. And, I think it set the mood right away. You know, it's kind of a stirring score, but there's an undertone of something dark. I thought that was really effective for setting the mood here.
Yeah, exciting yet ominous.
Yeah, tough to, you know, you don't get a lot of that today for sure. You know, even the classical scores that we get now feel kind of recycled and canned. But I liked how the camera pulls out from, you know, we're traveling along the road, we're on Sunset Boulevard, and we get the voiceover of who we find to be Joe. So this is obviously a trope of the film noir era.
Yeah, it's film noir, and you get the sense of, like other films you said in that genre. But, you know, it's kind of funny. I always get, like, I feel like I was watching The Twilight Zone. Almost, you know?
But you know what? It does have that feel to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like when we first start, I feel like they're setting an episode of The Twilight Zone. Or The Scary Door. I don't know if you're a Futurama nut.
Well, I mean, yes and no. But
That's another podcast.
Yeah, okay. We'll do that on another show. You know, I mean, hell, I've seen episodes of The Twilight Zone that were not as odd as this movie, so it might have fit. But what I remember from the first time I watched this, what I found very striking is, you know, the narrator's very nonchalant about it. He's just describing the place, the time of day, 5 a.m. And that's the homicide squad. There's a murder. Like, it's not a big deal. We get there, and the dude's in the pool, and then right away we see that that's him. That's the guy narrating it is the guy we just saw floating in the pool. So I thought I remember that grabbed me the first time I saw it. I thought that was really interesting. Again, that is also, I don't know if you'd say it's a trope of of noir fiction or hard-boiled detective stories. It's not, I don't know if this is the first time it was used. It's certainly not the last, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So what did you think of that reveal right up front?
Well, it's interesting. It's funny because, you know, I've never seen Sunset Boulevard until now for this podcast, and I now get some of the pop culture references in other movies. Like, say, for example, The Simpsons. Like, I remember clearly there's an episode of American Dad, show I know you do not enjoy, but I do, is there's a character named Steve, and he starts an episode with a narration, and he's floating in a pool of Jell-O. And I said, I didn't, and he's like dead, but I didn't understand this reference to something in pop culture. Obviously a movie. Which movie? I didn't know. Now I know. Yeah. They just put their little twist with Jell-O instead of water. So, and I've seen it. You've seen it in other, like, you know, I think we've seen it in The Simpsons. We've seen it in other movies. It doesn't have to be a guy floating in the pool, but something happening to a guy where he looks like he's dead or about to die.
Yes.
You know, like you could even think correct me if I'm wrong, is it the opening of Lost in that sense? Like, not exactly that way, but using that same trope.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like, you see if you wanted to kind of expand it out, like, you see the opening and somebody's fucked. Yeah. You know, whether they're dead or dying or bleeding out, because that's happened all the time. And then it's like, okay, let's go back and we'll show you how we got here. Fight Club opened with that same that same trope. So this is very likely where it started. I have to do a little more research there. But what I found really interesting is the shot itself of him floating in the pool. I thought was a very striking shot. And when I thought, at first I'm like, that's a really cool shot. And then I thought, well, shit, this is 1950.
Yeah.
They didn't have sophisticated equipment or the technology. Like, how did they do this? So
Saran wrap, Jeff. Saran wrap around the camera.
yeah, saran wrap around. Did they have saran wrap in 1950? Man, I don't know that they had it. No, what they did was they structured the shot so that a mirror on the bottom, and they shot down, and they shot the reflection off of the mirror coming out of the water. So the camera's obviously on dry land, but can shoot that, the reflection.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's a nice little bit of trivia.
Very, very creative. Like, nowadays, directors don't really need to worry too much about how they're going to place the camera in their shot, because you can do whatever you want, whether it's CG or whether it's physical, because, cameras are small. They can be wireless. They can move whatever. You can put them underwater. You can do whatever you want with them. So it just shows some of the creativity of the filmmaker here. I thought was pretty great. So anyway, so we get so we're going back 6 months as our narrator takes us back, and we see our hero Joe, and he's banging away at his typewriter in his apartment there. A couple guys show up, and they want to they're there to repo his car. And this is a small scene, but I really liked every piece of information we learn in this scene. It's super compact, but we learn that, so Joe's a writer, and a failed one at that. Shitty apartment. We know we get an insight into his character, because he, as any writer would do, he weaves a story on his feet to get himself out of a bind. Also, dishonest, right?
I don't know, man. This is not much of a story. Oh, I lent my car, or a family member has it, or whatever he says. I don't know.
And they could tell his
monkey can come up with that story, man. No wonder he's a failed writer.
Maybe the monkey did, and that's why he's dead.
Coco the monkey.
Coco the monkey. Poor bastard. I didn't say it was a good story. He was just weaving a story. So, but he's also a liar. He's not. You get the impression he might not be the most honest guy. He already foresaw this. Had his car, parked in a parking lot across the street there. So yeah, I liked how compact that was. We learned a lot out of this little scene. You could say you could throw it away, but it does set the stage how important the car is in getting.
I don't know. To be honest, I think this kind of MacGuffin or plot point just to get him to where he needs to go, I think they could have come up with a much better story here. The idea of like financial repo men coming to get the car, and he's trying to escape him. I mean, seriously, I don't know. This is dated and poor. This almost took me out of the picture right away. I completely disagree with you. I know it's compact. That I agree with. They don't spend a lot of time, and they're just setting up the device to get him from point A to point B. But I don't know. I wasn't a fan of any of this. Even the dialogue. Now, we're talking about the dialogue that he's having, the standoff he's having with those repo men or financial repo men from the dealership. I didn't like this is very dated old Hollywood. You see? And it's kind of like, that kind of, you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean.
It's the slang and the vocabulary, right? Of the time, sign of the time. So completely get it. But I found that strange that the rest of the movie seemed more well written and grounded and not staged. Like this was forced, staged, classic Hollywood dialogue in these scenes here. Whereas I felt the rest of the movie didn't have that.
Well, I see what you're saying. I mean, it does feel a little bit staged. I mean, it makes me wonder. I don't know. I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole here quite a bit, but we're in the real world now. It seems staged because things aren't going his way. Later on, when things don't seem as staged, when the dialogue's better written, I mean, that's when he's in whatever that bizarre reality that he eventually finds himself into. So, there's kind of an interesting mirroring effect going on there. Like I say, I mean, maybe we're reading too much into it. I don't know, but anyway, I mean, it's just one scene. So yeah, it's a small scene. So gets the car, he heads over to the Paramount lot, and there's the gates to Paramount Studios, which from all accounts, at least from seeing on TV, it looks exactly the same today as it did way back in the 50s and sooner. So I thought that was kind of a cool shot where we get to see the arches of Paramount Studios though. Anyway, so he's in the office with the Paramount executive, Sheldrake, and he's pitching him this story and some bullshit about baseball, and gets involved with gangsters, and it's just not a sell. He's again, the script's been kicking around, so the exec calls for his secretary to look into this here. She finds the script called Bases Loaded, which sounds like, you know, some
fucking porn movie, man.
Well, it's going to say either porn movie or some, you know, feel good inner city coach takes over a baseball team filled with misfits with Keanu Reeves or something stupid. So it's nice to know some things have never changed.
Keanu Reeves. And we're Canadian.
Yeah.
That's okay.
How about a hockey movie with Sean William Scott instead? So the secretary rolls in. We meet Betty, who's the love interest for later, and she's got a 2-page synopsis, and she basically says it's a pile of shit. She says it's just a rehash of something that wasn't very good to begin with, and that's their introduction here. And Joe and Betty, they exchange some zippy dialogue here. And I mean, I'm kind of two minds here. What did you think of this conversation between the two, if you found anything of note here?
No, not much. Again, I think it's still the continuation of that stage dialogue. I was going to say even before, I think the only times I feel that this kind of classic retro Hollywood drama / slang / dialogue is like in the beginning of the movie, or anytime he has a scene with Betty.
Yeah.
So not a fan. I know it's just a MacGuffin to set the guy up, like backstory to set the guy up, and a MacGuffin for him to get from point A to point B, where we're eventually are going to be headed. Yeah,
and this is also part of the setup for some of the payoffs that happen in the third act as well. But I mean, the dialogue notwithstanding itself, I got a lot out of this conversation in the criticism of Hollywood sense. Like, she says that the script's kind of bullshit, and, you know, he's like, well, what do you recommend? James Joyce, Dostoevsky, you know, he's talking about really heavy stuff. And she's like, well, I think pictures should say a little something. And he says, well, okay, you need a message, just the story won't do. And, you know, she one of her lines is like, okay, so what? You just take plot 27-A, make it glossy, make it slick. And I thought, shit, it's 1950 and they're worrying about this. I mean, doesn't this describe exactly how movies are made now? I mean, you go to the theater now, and that's 99% of everything fits right down into that.
Well,
and I think
it's demographics, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
It's like selling to a demographic. So nothing has changed for Hollywood. I mean, you know, independent films do something different, but big studio pictures, it's just, I need to fit into a demographic to make my money.
Yeah.
They're not then, and with respect to that's this big business, nothing has changed.
Right. But interesting, because as we talked before, as this sort of seemed like a Hollywood movie made, you know, by Hollywood people for Hollywood people. You know, we're not using a fake studio. It's Paramount, and it's being very self-aware and self-critical at the same time. And I thought that was interesting. That you know, that a big studio would want to do that, right? Make a movie about itself where it doesn't look like it's not portraying itself in the most positive light.
No, but I think what, you know, we are maybe reading into some of the subtext that really wasn't the focus of the writers or the point of the picture. I think, you know, really it's about who Gloria Swanson is, Norma Desmond is, and who Gloria Swanson is and was versus as she has aged, and also the transition from silent pictures into pictures with sound, you know, moving pictures, as I think they would call it or something. I'm not sure. So
the talk, I think, is what.
Yeah, so I think it was more to deal with those two topics at the time was the focus of this movie. At least that's my interpretation. You know, we can read into other subtexts too, like, you know, actresses getting parts as they age, and that's still a relevant topic, and even in today's world for actresses or as women in other jobs, right? Just as they get older, it's tougher for women to still find a job in comparison to a man. So, I mean, I think that still pretty much rings fairly true. So, you know, maybe are they having some small commentary on that even back in 1950? Possibly. But yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah. They end their little exchange here. I don't know, maybe speaking of reading too much into things, they end their little exchange here, and Betty just says goodbye, and Joe says, yeah, goodbye, and maybe next time I'll write the naked and the dead. And I'm like, was that his veil?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he just said, yeah, I hope you end up raped and murdered in a ditch somewhere, bitch. That's what I heard when he said.
Yeah, you could take it that way. I also interpret it as like, you're a woman and you just go read your Harlequin romance novel where everyone is still in the 1950s. They're still all dressed in the novel.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yeah. Definitely wasn't paying her a compliment there. I think that's for sure.
No,
so
either way, it's not a compliment.
No. So Joe does not get what he needs out of the studio here. He asks for a loan, gets rebuked, so it gets booted out basically. And then I kind of like this scene here. He says he drove down to headquarters. And when he said that line, going back to the film noir genre, I got the picture of like the hard-boiled detective driving back down to headquarters to continue the investigation. I don't know if that was the intent here, but kind of definitely a sign of the times when you get to a drugstore and this is a place where, people hang out, actors, writers, lots of people, and this is where you go to jump on the telephone and start hammering nickels into it here. So I thought it was kind of neat. Not a whole lot else going on here other than just the nostalgia piece. The fact that this is a place that even existed in relatively recent times it's odd. Like this kind of thing doesn't exist anymore. What would the analog be of this today?
Good question. I don't know. Like
an internet cafe, a Starbucks. I mean, there really isn't anything like this anymore. So
I think the Starbucks or internet cafe, coffee shop. I mean, it's pretty much where the equivalent in today's society, right?
Yeah.
Your fucking phone is pretty much the equivalent to this thing, right?
You're right. Your phone is the equivalent to everything now. It doesn't matter. And, it's interesting. I mean, like your kids are going to grow up never having seen probably in real life a telephone booth. They'll know what it is the same way that you and I know what a telegraph machine was, right? But we'll never have seen one in person. So it's just kind of neat how some of these things change. But anyway, so he gets a hold of his agent after making a bunch of calls, tracks him down to the golf course, and again doesn't really have any luck here. His agent says, well, no, your car's going to get repoed. Yeah, it's fine. You just sit in front of your typewriter. Oh, you're hungry? It's okay too. The best stuff was written on an empty stomach. So
yeah, it seems harsh, but it seems like good advice too.
Yeah, tough love. And again, we're getting a little bit more insight into Joe's character. I mean, obviously he's desperate, but he's trying to kind of claw his way out of his situation. But maybe the fact of the matter is that he sucks at this whole thing. He might just be a shit writer.
Yeah, and he's shit or lazy or
lazy. Yeah,
one of the two. Probably a combination of both.
Well, a combination of both. I mean, he's not a knight in shining armor. He's not a perfect guy, a hero. I find him very relatable in the sense that he kind of feels the world's against him. He feels like he's doing what he needs here, what he can do in order to improve his situation. But if he were to look in the mirror, he'd probably see that no, he's not who he could be. He's not who he should be. Maybe he should be focusing his energy in other places. I mean, I like characters that are constructed in this manner, because they're very relatable. I mean, we can all look at ourselves and I think, see a lot of ourselves in characters like this.
Yes.
Agreed. So some bullshit on the highway. He blows a tire and...
Oh yeah, this fucking car chase. Yeah. And anything to do with those repo guys, it's just it's silly.
Yeah, it is a little bit silly for sure. And this is where I would agree with you that this is, this is just a mechanism to get him to where he needs to go. But that being said, he does need to get to where he needs to go. So you have to get him there some way. And at least it's brief, I guess.
Yeah.
So he blows a tire and down the rabbit hole he goes. And this part after the chase I like is he kind of goes down the driveway and it's now a totally different world. I mean, it's one of these opulent old mansions, but it's run down, overgrown, this old car in the driveway that's, super luxury car, but it's worn down, and the place is just a mess, absolute mess. And he, as he describes it, to us in his voiceover, the kind of house that crazy movie people built back in the crazy 20s. So I thought that was, it's kind of neat as we get the initial impressions of, his, the start of him tumbling down to this other world here. What did you think of the introduction to this setting that's going to be such an important part of the rest of the movie?
Oh, I loved it. This aspect, it feels like it transcends genres, whether you're talking about noir or classic movies from Hollywood or horror movies even to this day. I feel it, or mysteries. You get that ominous vibe setting in a grand setting where an adventure or something interesting is really going to happen. It's a totally different world for not just the character, but the audience itself.
Yeah, exactly. And I love it when movies are able to pull that off. They kind of just grabs you and then slowly just pulls you into this other place, like you said, where whatever the adventure is going to be, whether it's exciting or scary or whatever, something about the mystery is great. And then he hears a voice yelling from the second floor. He doesn't really know what's going on, but here's Butler ushers him in. As an older guy, obviously this is not a squatter. This is a professional butler. He's all done up in his butler duds. He's no Alfred Pennyworth, but he means business. This guy who's got the sort of sharp German accent, and he's not really sure what's going on, and he just sending him upstairs. So what's a man to do when an old German dude's yelling at you to do shit? This in 1950, you fucking do it. So up he goes, and again, he's tumbling further down. You get a sense of this place, and it's not really run down on the inside. It's got all of the opulence and indulgence of as you'd expect to find in a movie star's mansion from this period. And we finally meet up with Norma Desmond. So we don't know who she is. And again, it's kind of a strange scene. We don't really know what's going on. We got this weird room, and she's dressed all weird and acting strange, like she's talking to him like she's expecting him, and he doesn't have a fucking clue what's going on. And there's this figure on this table under the shroud. So before the reveal here, again, how are you finding this as the setting further expands itself? Are you getting drawn in here? Like, what are you thinking at this point?
I'm not sure if I'm getting more drawn in just yet. I think when he eventually has a little bit more of a conversation with Norma, then that's a bit of a different story. This whole thing with the funeral of the monkey, I found it kind of, just a little bizarre, but high society Hollywood freaks. I guess that's, maybe she considered it family. She was lonely, so she jazzed it all up, his funeral. And a little odd, but I really didn't pay too much attention to that aspect. I wasn't really more drawn in or taken aback just yet.
Yeah, and I was drawn in, but I was so confused. I'm like, what is this dead monkey doing here? It was so bizarre, but I kind of liked I liked that about this here this world is something completely different than what this guy, is used to, has seen before. An odd choice from a filmmaking perspective. Maybe it was more common to keep a monkey as a pet in the 50s, maybe not. I don't know. He's trying to sort of extricate himself from the situation here, but then he recognizes her, and he says the line, "Oh, you're Norma Desmond. You used to be in pictures. You used to be big." And she has the line, "I am big. It's the pictures that got small." And I love that. I love that line. I thought that was a great line.
I agree. Yeah, she was striking right off the bat.
Yeah. It's very striking right off the bat. Crazy, powerful at the same time. Yeah.
Give you my first reactionary instinct to when I saw her, and when she first started speaking and hamming it up a little bit, is Shatner. Female William Shatner.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, could you not see Shatner in this role?
if you did a gender reversal here, yes and no. And here's why I say yes and no. So yes, because absolutely, Shatner has that larger than life type of persona to him, and certainly has the ability to I would say believably deliver melodramatic performances in a good way, right? That would sell it. So yes, that's actually very interesting that you say that. The reason why I say no slightly is like a young William Shatner, I think would have definitely worked, but
young William Shatner. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but because it is an older character.
Oh yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, so it's
all things being equal. Yeah, that's maybe they should do a remake of Sunset Boulevard
with William Shatner.
He's a little long in the tooth even for this now, but. Maybe 20 years ago.
We'd watch it. You'd watch it.
Oh, yeah, I'd watch it. But 20 years ago, it would have been great.
Yeah.
Anyway, shout out to Big Bill. Actually, that's interesting. I can't get the picture out of my mind because I've seen his face in black and white, and now it's just burned into my eyes as William Shatner.
As it should.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm not going to.
I have done my job for today.
Yes, you have. Thanks. Thank you. And that's the show, ladies and gentlemen. I got to go burn my eyeballs out. Anyway, as they continue their witty repartee, again, and Joe has the line, like she's belittling the movies as they are now because people talk in them. So she just says they talk and they talk and they talk, which to a guy who writes is, I imagine he's taking exception. But he also, I think, might agree with her. He says that's where the popcorn business comes in. You buy yourself a bag and you plug up your ears. So he's no more a fan, I don't think, of the films than she is at this point. They keep their exchange going, and on the one hand, it's pretty zippy. I'd say it's well written in the sense that each line is crafted, but sometimes when each line is crafted so particularly, it starts to stand out a little bit, especially when you have a character like Norma who's so melodramatic. I don't know. I think maybe a little bit over the top here. What do you think?
Yeah, in these opening scenes, the way she's kind of gesturing with her head and very stiff, very jerky. I mean, again, first instinct Shatner, but melodramatic's probably and overacting, but the melodramatic's still probably the more appropriate term here. You would have to kind of think that as a silent movie star, they had to, just like Shatner, there's always this joke. It's like he did what he did in the 60s because he had to overcompensate for bad special effects. So did silent movie stars have to overcompensate for no audio?
Well, I mean, I would say absolutely they would have to. Yeah, you got to move your head around to emote because you can't use dialogue to do it. You can't. There's no sound. So yeah, and so I think it fits. I think her mannerisms fit perfectly here because you're right. It's over exaggerated. It's just the dialogue itself. Well, again, maybe it's on purpose because we're talking about, we're pulling this silent film star into the age of scripted of the talkies. So, maybe that's.
Yeah, I think maybe that's exactly why she is not comfortable in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
She can't relate at all.
No, she can't relate at all. It's
And then you add the concept of ego and vanity, right? Like she cannot accept that she is no longer relevant. So whether she's crazy or she's just full of herself and can't see it, as the human ego and id play with each other there. Yeah, that's why she is who she is and how she is.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of ego, I mean, she says, the line, they took the idols and smashed them, but she sees herself, she's one of the idols of the era, and she's been smashed, right? Her career is effectively over. She's been shut up in this place for decades, I guess, at this point. So, this is an important conversation. You could unpack this one for days, but yeah, again, I think that getting the gist of it is, it's how Hollywood has definitely left her behind, right? But then the irony there is she's written her own movie script, or she takes him into the, I guess what you would call the living room, and it's just buried under piles and piles and piles of paper, where she's handwritten this script. It took her years to write, and she's kind of a little nutso here, but convinces Joe to read the script, which takes him.
I kind of wonder what the script was about. I mean, Was it similar at all to Star Trek V, The Final Frontier? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
What does God need with the starship, right?
What does God need with the starship? I think that there is something here. I think there's a story. I don't know what the reference is because I was more concerned with some of the other features here. I didn't really look into it, but I do think she describes certain aspects here that do reference a story. She says it's the story of Salome. So I think that's probably a something, which we can maybe hit the Google machine here pretty quick. But it's obviously a mess, right? Like the whole thing's a mess. And I like that it's portrayed as a mess in two ways. Like she's nuts and there's just shit everywhere. So this is, we're not led to believe as viewers that, she's written the next great film. She's written a large garbage fire here is basically what she's done, right? But he's convinced to sit down and read it, which he does, late into the night. It just gets weirder because, sure enough, a guy shows up with the baby coffin for the monkey, and he marvels at how all of this whole monkey thing is all done with great dignity. Must have been a very, very important chimp, is what he says, the great grandson of King Kong, maybe. And I thought this is the microcosm for what the movie's saying is like
anything big, like Hollywood isn't as big and grand as it used to be.
Well, it's all monkey business, right? They're just playing pretend, but they do it with such, grand seriousness. Like it's the most important thing in the world. Even today, it's in our culture, the movie business is very serious, is very important. People take their entertainment very seriously. I don't know 60% of the internet is devoted to people bitching about movies and TV shows, right? If it's not porn. And then it's
the other, you got the numbers wrong. 99% porn.
1%.
Yeah. And then the other 1% is the bitching about movies.
Bitching about movies. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. What was I thinking? But going all the way back.
It's like porn math.
Yeah. It's bat math. If there's even a 1% chance that people aren't watching porn, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
Yes.
But how interesting that this has always been Hollywood, or at least how the writers see it here. So I thought that was pretty neat. It's such a bizarre scene to see that guy walk in with that small coffin, and it's for the monkey. It's like, man, this shit is weird. I don't know. I was very struck by that particular scene and his line there. I don't know if that had any.
Like, are you like weirded out because of the burial in the backyard, or because there was a coffin, or because she took it so seriously? She has no family. She has no kids.
Not so much. So the first thing that hit me is, we're before the burial, but just when the guy gets there with the coffin. So first of all, the image was striking. And then his commentary on it, I thought was, he's not making a commentary on Hollywood, but the movie is making the commentary on Hollywood through the whole thing. So, that's what I was kind of pulling out. And like I said, maybe it just.
Well, I just take it as that, two things. She was lonely, and this is just how the stars of yesteryear did things. She just said it herself. She was always big. The pictures got smaller. So if you see throughout the rest of the movie, she does everything big. Dresses big, car is grand, goes out on a simple little drive. It's like the most fanciest thing you'll ever see. Does everything big. Gets ready for the movies later very big, right? For her pretend filming and all that stuff. Nothing is small with her.
No, that's absolutely correct. So her character is, that's correct. Yeah.
So I think that just fits straight in with who she is.
Oh, it absolutely fits straight in with who she is. And I think that's part of why it works so well, because I think it fits with the story on the top. And then I think it fits with the commentary underneath. But anyway, that's what I think. So, but Joe reads this and he starts to get, he starts to sniff around his next paycheck. And I also like this, this little exchange here where he kind of writes his way into being the script doctor on this film by telling her all of the reasons why he doesn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
She's asking his astrological sign, and he's like, whatever. And it's like, I'm busy, I got another job, I'm expensive. Like, I better do this. And then she's just laying it down, and he's like, I've got this all wrapped up. He thinks he's got her wrapped around his finger. So I really liked how he.
Yeah, I like these scenes too. Yeah, I liked how he took advantage of the situation.
Yeah. Joke's on him, though, I guess, as it's progress, right? Because as he finds that she won't let him leave with the scripts, there's nowhere to go. She basically holds him prisoner now, right?
I'm wondering if Misery had some kind of, like the book and the movie had some inspiration from this as well. Probably this isn't the first movie where someone's being taken captive and held to write or do something for somebody, but very similar. I had that initial ominous feeling that, you obviously know that he's going to end up dead, but this just reconfirms it right there. She's the one who's going to do it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. You can see the mistake he's making, right here as he agrees to stay. It was this kind of an odd exchange between Max and Joe here, where, he says something like, Max says something like, I just, made the bed today or something. He's like, well, why'd you make it today? Like, you could have known I was coming or something like that. It was very ominous again, almost supernatural, even though, it's not actually supernatural, but certainly unsettling, as he's concocting. He says the line that, this whole place is out of beat with the rest of the world. And I thought, that was also a really good line. As we've kind of talked, he's not really in his reality anymore. He's in
hers.
Yeah. There's the burial of the monkey. I was already, it was already weird to me as he's looking out the window. He's in his room now. He's looking out the window. There's the last rites for the hairy old chimp, as he says, and again, performed with the utmost seriousness. And he says, kind of what you were saying is, was her life really so empty as all of that, right? That was her family. So a little bit of pity towards Norma at this point. We find that, he awakens and all of his shit is just in this room now. So all of his stuff's been moved. He's had this weird dream. He kind of tries to resist at this point. And now she's pulling the same kind of game on him. She's just using her, strength of willpower to keep him there. He's like, I'm not staying. Don't unpack my shit. And she's like, it's already done. We've paid for the rent. We've done everything. It's done. It's in. So, he's down the rabbit hole. What's your impressions to this point, Terry? We're about to the end of Act 1 here. What do you think?
Yeah, again, the feeling of, him being trapped and the ominous feeling that obviously, since the end result is shown at the beginning of the movie, but this just, again, reconfirms it. Yeah, she's got her claws into him. He thought, she turned the tables on him. He initially thought he turned the tables on her, but it's the other way around.
Yeah, exactly.
She's 2 steps ahead of him.
Yeah. So eventually he loses his, there's a scene there where she's got some friends over. And this was interesting because she has some friends over to play
Cards,
bridge.
Yeah. Bridge,
Yeah. And, that's what they played, man. Bridge. It's not Texas Hold'em. Every time people play cards now, it's Texas Hold'em, which I'm getting a little tired of, but, so they're playing bridge. And what was interesting is we had people from the outside worlds, or at least her former life, if you will, in the mansion. And
yeah, this was a fascinating scene because she looked like, it didn't seem that it was a stuffy affair. It seemed like they were, at least the girls, were they were engaged, they were engrossed in the card game. They were having fun. It wasn't something snobby or stuffy. And I found that kind of interesting. It almost didn't seem to fit with that character.
Yeah, I agree. It didn't. And maybe the reason why is this is, maybe part of her, maybe these are enablers, right? They're people from her old life and she can kind of reach back into that life at this moment. So she becomes a little bit more lively. She's not focused on Joe. She doesn't care about his fucking car or the money. It's like, I'm playing cards and nothing, because the rest is always about Joe after this point. But right now he's nothing. She tells him to dump the fucking ashtray, Yeah.
No, but it's interesting, but I'm not sure it really fits with the character. It's interesting to get this windowed glimpse into her life, but I don't know. It just, something felt off. If she was able to have friends like this and just enjoy a game of cards, coming to her house, they're hanging out, for them, that's a good time. What's wrong with that? It's normal.
Yeah, and she doesn't, and normal's not
Her.
It's not her bag, right? So yeah, it does. Yeah, and I agree. It does feel a little bit out of place. So I had trouble unpacking.
Yeah, and you know what I think? I think the focus here was on Joe losing his stupid car. Again, this with the goddamn repo man coming back into the picture. I don't like this whole storyline at all. This D storyline or B storyline, whatever you call it.
Well, yeah, it's not even the B storyline, right? It's it's like the D or C storyline. Yeah,
it's terrible. They should have come up with another way to get him to that house, and that was it. It was just,
Well, they could have just forgotten about the car. I mean, he's got a flat tire. And
it's just hidden away. You didn't need to bring these guys into it. I think that was truly the focus of the scene. It wasn't about giving the audience a glimpse into her hanging out with her friends. I don't think so.
No, it wasn't. It was, at least it doesn't seem so. It seems like, a mechanism to get him more dependent on her. Because now he needs them to even drive him around anywhere, right? He can't even go to the store by himself.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, this fancy old car that the gas guzzler, and this is the point where she starts to try to remake him into somebody more opulent, more tolerable, somebody that she would see as
high society.
Yeah, high society. Yeah, an equal, if you will, somebody that deserves to share oxygen with her. So
share her glory.
Yeah, that's right. So they get some suits made, and I actually like the line here. He's got the they're making a suit for him. The guy comes over with the hair with the camel hair coats, and he's trying to upsell him. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
Yeah, and he's like, "Well, camel's hair will do," and he's just like, "Well,
why don't you go for the most expensive one?"
Yeah, like while she's paying, yeah, and how how emasculating for him at that point, like this.
Yeah, it's emasculating, and that was the point of the scene. But hey, I would have gone for the most expensive one.
I definitely would have gone for the most expensive one. I would have bought a couple more suits for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I will whore myself out to that rich lady any and every day.
Yeah, but I would have probably bought like a fucking monkey just in case, because it's just like if things go wrong, it's starting to feel like at this point, it's like, oh, I better have a backup plan to distract her.
Yeah. Look, a monkey. Yeah, he did not think ahead. He would have walked.
Throw shit at you. Don't worry. More entertaining than the last.
Yeah. Okay, so we get she talks about getting him a tux for New Year's Eve. So this sequence here I thought was interesting because, well, you know what? Maybe the setup from the bridge scene, I just thought of this now, because we get to the New Year's party, right? He comes down, he's all...
expecting to see friends. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? So he's been moved into the main house proper because of the rain damage in his room over the garage. And, he comes in, the whole place is set. There's an orchestra playing. There's food all over the place. We know that she has friends. So even, I'm thinking, okay, well, obviously people are going to be showing up, right? It seems natural at this point. So maybe that was the point of the bridge scene.
I agree.
Yeah. Because if that hadn't been there, we know nobody's coming.
Yeah. I retract that statement.
Yeah.
Before.
I'm glad we're here to be able to dig into this stuff so we can straighten this shit out, because what would we do without the podcast, man? I don't know. Nothing.
What we'd always do. Nothing. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll rewind a little bit here. So when Joe moves into the bedroom and Max says that it was the room of the husband or the husbands, that she's been married 3 times before, but this is where he kind of confides in him a little bit. Because there's no locks or doorknobs on any of the doors, because, she's prone to melancholy, as he says, and there have been some suicide attempts. So, can't have sleeping pills in the house, no razor blades. They shut off the gas in her room like nothing. They gotta, Max is basically, wrapping her in bubble wrap, making sure that, she's fragile. We have to make sure she doesn't break. And, they start talking about the fan letters she gets, and we discover that it's Max basically who's been writing all of these fan letters that she still gets decades later. So
Shatner.
Yeah, Shatner.
Oh, Bill, are you writing all these letters to yourself?
Oh, Bill. Guarantee you she's getting signed portraits of that smarmy, smiling Bill Shatner, my shit don't stink smile picture that we've all seen so many times.
Kirk was climbing a mountain.
He
Why does
was.
he climb a mountain?
Anyway, back to New Year's Eve.
I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's a classic.
You can educate me. I'll show you. Yeah, you can educate me. Anyway, so let's get back to New Year's Eve. Again, the place is set for a grand party. She's had the floor waxed, pouring champagne, and they're hitting it off a little bit. They start to dance a bit of a tango, and then he's like, it's getting late. Like, shouldn't we be waiting for the others? Like, where's everybody? And, I think it's past 10 o'clock. When's everybody supposed to get here? And she's like who? It was kind of matter of fact. She's like, well, there's nobody else coming. Like, this is just for us. This is for you and me. And now this is the point where, we discover, and she says that she's fallen in love with him, and he's kind of freaking out here. So they dance a little bit, but the argument breaks out. He's kind of freaking at this point, which I think is understandable. What do you think? How's the crazy level for you here, Harry?
It's crazy yet understandable. I mean, this is a woman of, as we said, she was big. She still thinks she's big, but she's also lonely and fragile. So she's depressed. She's probably a bit psychotic. We talked about the ego. Yeah, if I were in those shoes, I would be worried, but, you have to still feel for her. You have to understand where she's coming from. So I didn't really think too much of it. Definitely a warning sign for the character of Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. You do have to feel sorry. You have to feel pity for her at this point because she is lonely. She's off. As we've talked about the monkey, as silly as that is, but her only friend, her only family, she's vulnerable at this point. But when you have an ego this large, when it gets damaged, disaster is bound to fall, right? So there's no other out here. She's just going to go crazy. But so he takes off, runs out into the rain, and hitches his ride back into town to his old friend Artie's house there, into the apartment. And this is kind of a glimpse of his old life, which we kind of get a feel for as he walks in. Artie knows him, people know him, and then it's like they realize he's wearing this expensive coat, he's wearing a tuxedo. And, clearly he doesn't belong in this world any longer. And I like this moment here because he's seems so out of place in the other world because it's so bizarre. And then, the next thing you know, as soon as he gets out, he doesn't belong in this one anymore. It's almost as bizarre in the other as bizarre in the other direction, as Norma's world. So I thought it was an interesting exchange here. It looks like he's trying to get out. He just wants to stay at Artie's place, take the couch, and here we run into Betty again. And now the fireworks are going. There's definitely some chemistry here. The zippy dialogue continues.
Again, now for me, we're getting back into that classic, almost cringeworthy, old retro Hollywood dialogue. Staged, forced, just to get the romance out. It's so unnatural, but that's just the way movies were written back then, right? Overly dramatic. I can't see two people talking this way.
Well, no, definitely two people don't talk this way, and that's again, the movie is overwritten in some spots where you're right, people don't talk this way, but at the same time, it does. I think it provides a fairly effective juxtaposition. There's no real. It's difficult to show how different these two worlds are, and be able to do it in more ways than just he's wearing a tuxedo and he's at somebody's apartment. There's more to it. It feels differently. I think it feels differently because of the dialogue, and I think that's more effective on an emotional level. If you're not picking up that the dialogue is overwritten, as you and I are, you're still going to get the sense it's a very different feel to it than his life at the mansion. And I think that from that perspective, this actually works. Because it takes us out of it a bit, because he's taken himself out of that life.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, so they chit chat a little bit. They making the googly eyes at each other. And, he's making the decision. Okay, I'm out of that old life. I'm leaving. So he calls the mansion, talks to Max, like, get me my shit. I'm out. And this is where he, Max reveals that she has, she got the razor from his room and slit her wrists. So he heads back to the mansion. Obviously, she's still alive, but injured. And this is kind of where he gets pulled in. Now, you tell me. Obviously, she's been hurt already. She's in a tough situation, and did she make a legitimate attempt on her own life here, or was this just a tool, a pity tool to get him back in and to bury him further in her prison? What do you think?
I think they don't make it clear, but just based on who she is and what is most important to this character, which is her reclaiming her fame, I think she probably did not make a legitimate attempt at suicide and just try to lure him back into her trap. That's just my opinion because it's consistent with the character. But yeah. I do want to ask you something. I can't recall if they in the movie ever explained what happened to her other husbands. Who were they? Were they also writers or Hollywood bigwigs, and what happened to them?
It did not explain what happened to two of them.
I know it happened to one of them.
Yeah.
Aside from I think she only had another two.
Yeah, because I think Max said that she had three husbands.
Yeah, so the other two is who I'm referring to.
I believe not. I don't think that it was ever revealed what happened to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm assuming Hollywood at the time was the same as Hollywood now, where multiple marriages are, par for the course. So
yeah, but I'm just opening the door of a possibility is if she legitimately tried to commit suicide, like the movie doesn't go to this place. I think, obviously we know, we don't want to skip too far ahead, but we all know that Joe dies. Did she kill the other two guys? I don't think so.
I don't know that I don't think that she killed them. I don't get that.
No. I don't think that fits at all. So yeah. That's why I don't think that I think it was, if she drove the other two away, it was just because of her ego and her unwillingness to age gracefully.
Well, no, I mean, I totally agree. Like, she can't, I mean, and this is an interesting thing too, is like, she's not living as anybody's woman, like this is 1950, a woman's place was fairly defined, especially in a marriage, movie star or not. And she's not being anybody's woman. Like she's the boss.
No, she's a pioneer for women's rights for sure, but which is great to see on the screen back then. But I think based on what I had read, because I knew of her before this, Gloria Swanson, that now we're getting into reality here. I think she was also, she was a big star back then, and she was I think she had dalliances, and so I think it would depend. I think maybe, I don't know how it really was for, women, if you get to a certain stature in Hollywood, even then, and maybe the other rules of women still don't apply to you. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, nobody would have been expecting Gloria Swanson to be like cooking dinner for everybody. Certainly not. So you're right. I mean, some of those more traditional, middle class domestic roles, nobody's going to have expected to impose upon her. But even in the hierarchy of Hollywood, I mean, a woman's not going to make as much money as her male peers. I mean, but my impression would be, especially from the time, is you could look at it a couple different ways. I mean, if you wanted to go back in time and think of the sensibility of the time, you'd say a man there is like, well, I can't tame this. I'm out of here. She's got too much personality. I don't want an equal. I want a wife. And, that might have been the sensibility at the time. So maybe that's what they're saying is she couldn't keep a husband.
Yeah.
Whereas if you did something like this today, it'd be like, she doesn't need a husband because she's got, she's her own person. And, she'd take an equal, but she doesn't need to be anybody's, subordinate. So, there's a couple things you could read into there for sure, I'd say. But anyway, I mean, back to the back to the film. Joe certainly, he can't leave now. I don't get the impression that he wants to stay, but he's like, he does have some level of, he cares for her somewhat. So he stays now, and New Year's over, and we kind of dissolve into the final act here. So as we get into the third act, let's just pause for a sec and look back on the second act. What are your thoughts to this point?
I'm digging the movie still quite a bit, enjoying myself. I'm really enjoying the scenes between Joe and Norma, and seeing how she's trapping him, and just her nuances and the way she is. Like, she has all these, like, this personality that she has, as we said, overdramatic, melodramatic. All of this is quite fascinating to me to see unfold on the screen. So I'm really enjoying her character. So far, I'm enjoying it so far. Minus the scenes of him and whoever the other girl is.
Yeah. No, I think I have to agree with you there. Her character is so great. It's so engaging, and her, her performance here is, this has got to be a difficult character to portray in a sympathetic way. she's kind of nuts, and she does some crazy shit, but she still is able to, imbue it with, the sympathy and vulnerability that make you feel for that character. It's tough. I think she's carrying the movie on her back. But that being said, William Holden is doing a pretty good job as Joe, I think, as well. He's kind of detached and floating here, and I think he's an interesting counterpoint to Norma, because she's so over the top and he's so under the radar. I think that really works with their chemistry, their back and forth. So, all right. So let's dive into the third and final act here. A couple months have passed. Now it's California. It might have been 20 minutes. Summertime. The pool is filled. As soon as I saw the pool in a functioning state again, I'm like, okay, it's coming. This guy's going to be eating it pretty soon here. And we get a couple scenes there where Betty's trying to reach Joe at the house. And the script, we get the impression the script is now done. It's taken many months, and she's going to send it to our famed director, Mr. DeMille, because he's the only option. He was her director way back in the day. She's speaking about him like he's the guy to send it to. Also because the astrological symbols, I'm not sure what the significance of those references were, but.
Yeah, but it was interesting as she went to the studio. Like so many people knew of her still.
Yeah.
And it's still kind of interesting how, I understand if the old security guard would recognize her and the younger one didn't, that makes sense. But then when she entered the lot, everybody was surrounding her. Like she was,
yeah, that
was par for the course. So still some weird, it's a little odd. Some things feel a little inconsistent here, because if she was still that much of a draw, that quickly and that instantly, and that much admiration for the actress from all these other people, you would think that she'd still be in movies. So what does this say? I don't know here.
Well, that's interesting. That's a good question. Maybe,
I think maybe, sorry to interrupt, it's just, but maybe what they're trying to do is just, the filmmakers are just trying to show she got a taste of, the fans wanting her back, or that popularity. So her ego swells, and it's really about just watching her ego swell and swell, like she's back. Everybody loves me, those kind of things. Yeah, well, I think that was necessary for the final scenes there, right? To build her ego. Part of it is, I don't know. If Sean Connery showed up on a movie set, every actor would be looking for his autograph, even the guy hasn't made a movie in, 15, 16, 17 years, right? It's been almost 20 years for a guy like that. And his last movie was a bag of shit, but still, like, the reverence would still be there, right? Everybody be all over the guy. Yeah, he's just one example, but I found it realistic. I think it was, I don't know. I'm always looking for something deeper when you get a scene of that importance. Could have been that, part of that they needed to pump her tires a little bit. Yeah. In order to make the final sequence work. Yeah. No, I agree. Just a little bit of a mixed message for me, but it was still a fun scene to watch. Yeah. Fun scene to watch. So
some interesting bit of trivia here. So there's actually two interesting bits of trivia here. So the set they walk onto was actually a real set of the real movie that Cecil DeMille was filming at that time.
Which was what?
You
know? Oh.
Yeah. I do know it was.
I thought you were about to say the Goonies, but I'm saying you're a few decades off.
The Goonies. Yeah, so it was the actual set of the film Samson and Delilah that he was making at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, here's a piece of trivia that you're going to like. So when they get to the lot there, and they meet the old guard there, and he says to go meet DeMille on stage 18.
Mm-hmm.
So that stage is one of the largest on the Paramount lot, known for years as the DeMille stage, but is now called, are you ready for this? The Star Trek stage.
Shatner.
As all of the movies and some of the TV shows were shot on that stage. From Star Trek The Next Generation onward, the main sets were actually right across the street in stages 8 and 9, which were right below the second floor office occupied by Betty in the upper floor there.
Oh, okay.
And those offices later became the home of the Star Trek art department.
Okay.
So a little bit of little connection there for the Shatner fans out there. I thought that was pretty neat, actually. I love those sort of like real life tie-ins. Because obviously they're on the lot, right? They're shooting the movie on the lot. That's the actual place. Those are the actual stages. So a little bit of
cool.
there. Yeah, very cool. Anyway, so there we skipped over a couple pieces here where Joe and Norma are driving around. They head into a drugstore to get some cigarettes, and Joe runs into Artie and Betty in the drugstore, and she tells him that one of his scripts has actually been kicking around and there's some interest in it, but he's not really interested in anything anymore. He's basically retired from writing. He's got his new life in the mansion with his fancy suits and the gold-plated cigarette lighter and on and on. So he kind of blows them both off, and then we get the scene where they head to the Paramount lot. And so she's living in a dream. She's not picking up what everybody's putting down. DeMille's trying to be polite to her. And it turns out that the phone calls from the studio, were just inquiries to rent the fancy car, but nobody has the heart to tell her about that. So it's kind of sad. It's kind of a sad situation there because now she's kind of going off on her own thing. She starts having all these treatments on her skin, make her look younger. She's on a diet, trimmed down. Like she's obsessed with getting into shape for the film. And Joe has obviously been convinced to work on this, to collaborate on the script with Betty in the evenings here. So he's bored. He wants something more, even though he kind of blew her off. He wants to get back into writing again. And she's just off in her world as well as she's trying to prepare for a movie that'll never happen. And there's actually one little scene, just to go back again to when she goes to the studio there. And I don't know if you made anything of it, but she's basically bothering DeMille with her shit. He feels sorry for her. He's like, "Oh, sit in my chair. I'm going to get to work. Just hang out as long as you want and walk." This is just before the shot that you mentioned where the light hits her face and everybody recognizes her. And there's a boom mic that's kind of hanging in her face there and just kind of freaks her out. And she swats it away like a bug. And I thought that was kind of neat because...
Yeah, that was cool. I noticed it right off the bat too. Again, that's, her fear. That's kind of almost like something of a phobia to her because...
Yeah.
Pictures of today or in the 50s were in her time, not in her time, like she's a silent star transitioning into pictures with sound. So she was never the star in any pictures with sound. So that's why that just represents everything. That's just it's her enemy.
Yeah. Exactly. I thought, and that's such a neat little detail, right? I thought it was,
it's a well-played scene.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so she's so we'll jump back ahead again where she's getting Frankensteined by all these beauty experts. Reminds me of that scene in Brazil. We did some time ago where the guy's mom's having her like face stretched out. Yeah. So that was kind of neat there. Anyway, so I thought the exchanges. As we see Joe and Betty, they're collaborating on the script. I thought the dialogue was toned down a little bit here. It wasn't quite as off as it was before, as we talked about. What did you think now as they're working together on the script?
Slightly better than before. I think some of the conversation they're starting to have now is a bit more natural. But, overall, I didn't dig any of the scenes between Joe and Betty in any part of this movie. I really didn't think they had any real chemistry, personally.
Oh, is that interesting? That's interesting. I thought their chemistry worked very well. I thought it was great because she was. You can see they're into each other, but she's she's not.
Again, you even get that scene where they're walking at night when the studio's empty and it's just getting some construction work done for the next day's shoots and things like that, and then you have that classic Hollywood, old school Hollywood moment where we're about to kiss. He asks her, but then he almost like you could see he almost crushes her arm.
Yeah,
does it very tightly, and it's like almost a borderline abuse right there. And
remember, you.
Yes, essentially, that's pretty much what he did.
Yeah,
except he just said, the next time I even think about kissing you, knock me over the head. I didn't like these scenes at all. We could joke about it, but they're cringeworthy. They're just too dated. Just. For someone who grew up in that time, I'm sure it was very normal to see, but I can't stand that's one of the fears I have when I go back and watch older movies and I'm sure millennials of today feel the same way about movies that we grew up with. Right?
Yeah,
they just can't relate. But I think that stretches even more from even our generation to movies from the 40s and 50s.
I agree. Actually, I do agree with you on that one for sure. Yeah. We find out that, hold on, where are we here?
Well, they're collaborating on the script.
Yeah, so they're collaborating.
Norma finds out, right?
Yeah, she knows that he's been kind of sneaking out, confronts him, and he blows it off, but he keeps sneaking out. And she eventually, she actually finds the script that they've been working on. And what kind of sets her off is the title of the script itself, which says, it's titled is Untitled Love Story, by Joe Gillis and Betty Schaefer, I believe her name is. So, this is kind of what sets it off. And, Norma calls Betty, in a way to kind of confront her. And, Joe walks in, grabs the phone, and he tells her to come over to the mansion, gives her the address. Norma's trying to explain herself, don't hate me. Even though he's the one who's having the affair, even though he's not having an affair, but he's the one who's been lying to her. And again, that, you see his character, and that's why I would go back to that, the first scene with the repo guys when they show up at his apartment. And it seemed innocent at the time where he's just, weaving a tale, telling a lie in order to save his car. His character is to try to write himself out of situations, right? He hasn't been truthful with Norma, and Norma's never told him a lie. I mean, maybe she never said all the whole truth, but she's never misled him or anything like that. She's been batshit crazy, but he's the one who's been lying to her. And that's the way that's kind of what I see at this point here, So Betty shows up at the mansion, and he's walking her through his life at this point, and he's basically Norma's whore at this point, right? He gives her what she needs as far as companionship and whatever else. And he gets the fancy suits, the custom made shoes, the cufflinks, the platinum keychains, as he says, the solid gold cigarette case, all of this stuff. And he doesn't, and he says, he doesn't want to go. She tries to get him out of there, and he's like, well, I don't want to go back to a one-room apartment I can't pay for, story that may sell and probably will not. So he's kind of he's giving her the cold shoulders, being a dick to get rid of her. And this is probably the most honest thing that he's done at this point.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of funny, we talk about ego and vanity for Norma, but then this is the male ego classic, and this is timeless, classic male ego and vanity of not wanting to maybe rely on Betty, rely on somebody else to take care of you, whether even if he wants to be with her or not, he wants to do it his own way without relying on somebody else. Because I think next scene is he leaves Norma anyways, right?
Well, and
putting on a show for Betty.
Yeah.
Because even though he's probably wants to have a relationship with her, his ego and vanity can't allow himself to rely on her. He's putting on a show trying to get rid of her.
Yeah.
And then he's going to leave on his own. Like he's admitting failure. A man's admitting failure if he's got to rely on a woman he cares about.
Well, is it? I mean, I agree. I mean, obviously he's putting on a show for Betty. I mean, that's certainly the case. But is it because he doesn't want to rely on her, or is it because he's trying to steer her away from him because he knows that she should go off and be with Artie and not be anywhere near him because he's he's a dick. Like
I don't know. The movie's not clear enough, and that I think that's you could look at it either way. Maybe that's a fault of the movie itself. I do have some problems, I will say, overall with the character of Joe. He's just not. Even though I know where you're coming from as a writer, it's kind of clever to see how he kind of talks himself out of situations because of his expertise with verbiage.
Yeah,
but I need something more than that to be engaged in a character. I really don't find that. I mean, that's a little interesting piece of thread there, but beyond that, there's not much to this character. I don't find him really that engaging, personally. I don't mind his relationship with Norma, but that's more dependent on Norma and how fascinating she is to see and watch. William Holden's character, I'm not finding a lot of meat here to keep me engaged. And that's why whenever he's away from Norma, I'm hating everything I'm seeing.
Interesting. And then, see, that's interesting because if you go back, I mean, he's kind of framing the story. So he's the one telling her story.
Well, sometimes the best stories are not about yourself, Geoff.
Bullshit. Not true. Anyway, so he gets, as we get back, as we were talking, he starts packing up his shit. He wants out of there. He's just gone. He wants to be gone. I mean, he's being really cold, but I mean, he's put himself in this situation. I mean, he's agreed to everything at this point, even though she's trapped him and used him. He's trying to escape, but he makes a big show of taking off the watch and the cufflinks and all the fancy stuff, packs up his old shit and gets ready to go. She's trying to get him to stay. She's trying to justify, like, they still want me. The movie's getting made. And then this is where he drops the bomb, is like, he tells her, like, everyone's just being nice. They just wanted to rent your car. And that wasn't it. And then he said, none of us had the heart to tell you. So that's it. She had showed him the pistol before, but he's out of, he had a good line here. He said, he says to her, grow up. You're a woman of 50, and there's nothing tragic about being 50, not unless you try to be 25. And I thought there was a couple interesting layers there. I mean, does that apply to only women in this era? Does it apply to men as well? Is it a commentary on trying to be something you're not? Which, I mean, she's an actor, and he's writing fantasy. He's lying. He's acting this whole time too. I thought, it's kind of an interesting line there, depending on what context.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back, I think this is really the focus of what we said. A Hollywood movie for Hollywood. It's a topic where I think they were talking about not just women, but it could apply to men too. Like the studios kind of pushing aside older people, not having room for them for the stars of yesteryear.
Yeah.
So it's a celebration of and recognition of those stars from the past. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it was critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. And this is, as we come to the end, Joe runs out into the yard. She's chasing him. She's got the gun. And boom, she busts some caps, 2 in the back, 1 in the stomach, and down into the pool he goes. And that's it. Joe is toast. He kind of gets, I don't know if you see, he got what was coming to him, but, we always knew this was coming. That was it for Joe. He got it. You could say the epilogue to the film here. The police are there, the media's there, and she's had a psychotic break or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I found this fascinating. Like, even that the police, I guess Hollywood stars even back then still got preferential treatment. None of them are willing to put cuffs on her, lay a hand on her, but they're willing to do whatever it takes to gently arrest her.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
I guess that has not changed.
That
it
has
doesn't
not
matter what
changed.
era you're in, right?
In fact, I bet it was worse then than it is now. I mean,
probably.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they treat her with some kind of reverence, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And
To get her, you know, let's just play along, get her down the stairs, you know, get the cameras out, you know, start taking pictures, because, you know, they're getting wind on what's going on, what it's going to take, what she really wants, and that's how the movie ends. And I think that last shot where she says, you know, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close up. I think that's the line I remember without even watching this movie. I think that's stapled in Hollywood lore. Yeah, and I think, you know, that line gets tossed around quite often in pop culture.
it does. Yeah, it's a very, very famous line for sure. I love the shot as she's coming down the stairs and everybody else is kind of static and she's the only one
moving. Yeah, I noticed that too. It's very well shot. Yeah.
Very well shot. Yeah.
And I think it would have been more, I would have liked it if nobody moved at all except her.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It'd have been good.
Almost there. They almost did it, but I think that might have been a nice way to kind of a good throwback to the times of, you know, more silent pictures or like, you know, very early Hollywood pictures where almost nothing was moving.
Oh yeah.
I think that would have been quite interesting if they did it that way.
Yeah. So there you go. That's the film, man. That's Sunset Boulevard. So one question I guess I want to ask you right now as we kind of get to the end of the film. Well, actually, first let's talk about the last shot where she's, you know, sort of coming right into the frame there with her, you know, her Jeffrey Rush eyes, you know.
Yeah, no, fantastic shot.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite shot in the movie, hands down.
Yeah.
I love it. I love everything about this kind of epilogue set piece. Fantastic. Again, anything to do with Norma Desmond herself has just been really great to see. Interesting character. Again, melodramatic, energetic, strange. You know, it's just a fun character to see displayed on the screen. I love that shot. It's a little scary. It's kind of like, you know, she's so out there right now and she's zooming in on the audience, like the picture, the camera's framing it and it's getting closer and closer and closer to her. It just shows what it's scary, but it shows you what ego and vanity, you know, if you become that self-absorbed, this is what you become.
Yeah. I love how they hold it for so long too. You know, they don't cut away from it.
No.
She just keeps coming. Could you imagine on the big screen seeing her come at you like that? I mean,
imagine in 3D. Maybe this one should get retrofitted for a 3D conversion.
That'd be hey, I'd watch it. I don't know that it'd be good, but I'd watch it. Yeah, so that's the film, man. That's Sunset Boulevard. So, you know, kind of a question that I want to ask is, I don't know, maybe it's not fair to ask it this way, but I mean, there's a lot going on here. So what is going on here? What's underneath it all for you? What's it about?
Well, I think I've already given my thoughts on that away. You know, I think, again, a Hollywood movie having a commentary about Hollywood itself, you know, you can talk about it just talking about women in general or the studios and how they treat the stars that have come and gone. They've just forgotten about them all. It's a studio system. It's still, you know, they focus on younger stars. Nobody cares about your elders anymore or the people who made you, like DeMille. You look at DeMille and even though he treats Norma very nice personally, but in the end, he really could give a rat's ass about her.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she just has been. So we don't care about her anymore. She doesn't make us any money because nobody's interested in her anymore. So it's commentary on the Hollywood system. You know, maybe they're trying to say we should respect of the people and celebrate their accomplishments of what has happened before. There's also that thread piece about the different type of technology, how technology has changed things. You're having a star from silent era cannot transition into, you know, these new movies that are made with the boom mics, with audio. So, you know, how technology is changing something. And that's a relevant, you know, topic even today. It doesn't have to be about just audio. Like people who are working, they can get displaced quite easily because technology just changes on a dime. And they just eat them up and spit them out. So it's commentary about life in general. So, yeah, I think that's really what it is. I don't really think I didn't really interpret anything more than that.
Well, I mean, I think you're right in a lot of ways there. And one of the things that I really do enjoy about the film is, I mean, it's interesting how much of the commentary is still relevant. It's 2016. It's been a long time, but a lot of what it's talking about are whether it's Hollywood, whether it's aging or gender roles. I mean, everything is it's still so modern. I mean, you could put any of these topics into a movie today and it would still work.
Yeah,
just as well.
Exactly. Because actors, whether it's women and men, and still obviously we could argue still. I think it's fair and safe to say that women, even more than men, as they age, they find it harder to maintain employment. Whether you're talking about Hollywood or anywhere else, in any other type of job.
Yeah.
And then men, same thing. Older men versus younger men, same situation. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to a lesser extent, but absolutely true. Yeah. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of the look and feel of this movie. As I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of movies of this era, and as such, I don't have a huge frame of reference. But obviously it's black and white, but I felt that from how it was edited and shot, it felt very modern to me in that it was very kinetic. The other movies of this era that I've seen, it's almost like they just kind of put the camera down and then let the actors talk, right? They just speak their lines, and it's
like more TV, like a soap opera.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like a soap opera. And outside of some of the the most talented filmmakers, I think that was a lot of what you saw. And this isn't that at all. I mean, there's, shots are framed very deliberately. I think there's one scene where, Joe is facing away from Norma. She's lying in bed, but we see her reflection in the mirror. So we can see them talking to each other, but they aren't looking at each other. For example, again, in the swimming pool shot, as I mentioned before, it just felt to me very kinetic, which
I would agree. I don't think, even though as I've been complaining about some scenes between Joe and Betty that have been seemed forced and stilted dialogue set back in that the 50s era that is unnatural. And I agree with you. I think other movies from the 40s and 50s, for today's modern audience, they would suffer people getting through it because of the way it's filmed. As you said, it's just very simplistic. You just set the camera down, very amateurish for comparison to today, what we can do today. But I didn't get that feeling out of this movie the way it was filmed. Maybe I was too engrossed in seeing what I was seeing with Norma Desmond and who she was, but maybe that just got lost into me. But I know it would stand out for me if it was the opposite. If what you were saying is a very stilted way of filming. Yeah. Here I felt it. I wouldn't go as far as saying kinetic and the camera was moving, but maybe just the way it was filmed, the director knew how to frame and place the camera appropriately.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think is. I think it shows very, fairly talented, director here. I mean, Billy Wilder was, certainly also has a long resume of films. I mean, some that you've heard of, maybe some you haven't, but he's got some famous things. So he's not an amateur. That's for sure. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. He did a good job.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job too. Yeah. As far as performances go, I mean, Gloria Swanson, I think we've talked about her. I mean, fantastic performance from her. She's certainly the highlight of the film here. There's no question. I mean,
as I said, there's only one other person I could see in this role.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So overall, so we could talk about our other lead here, William Holden. What did you think of him?
Hit and miss. He wasn't bad. He wasn't great. Yeah. I didn't find him to be that engaging. He did his job. He had sort of some chemistry with Gloria Swanson, so that worked. So I'll give him credit there because you can't just throw anybody there. You have to have two actors that can play off each other well. I didn't like him and Betty, the actress who played Betty, and the scenes just by himself weren't that engaging either. So he was hit and miss for me.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you on the chemistry with Gloria Swanson. I mean, I thought they played off each other well. You're right. The fireworks weren't there with, in any of his other scenes, really. Again, I thought that, it worked because of the how much of an opposite he was to Norma. I thought that made sense to me. It felt, narratively it made sense to me. But how about Eric von Stroheim as Max the butler? What did you think of him?
Yeah, and we didn't even get to the fact that he was the third husband, but that's okay.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, he was the third husband. He was okay. He was kind of creepy yet not creepy at the same way. So I don't really know what to make of him.
He was creepy, and yeah, you're right. We didn't really get into the details there, as he was her
husband who was protecting him and loved him so much that even after a divorce, he became her butler. So what the fuck? It's kind of a little odd character there, in my opinion.
The judge sentenced him to be her butler.
Yes.
Got a car accident.
That's great. I love it.
I liked the final scene there where he's directing her, and
yes, that's true. I did like that. That was great. That was great.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I think we kind of unpacked pretty good. I don't have any other discussion points. Do you have anything else you want to dig into here?
I do. Just the only question I had for you, maybe you partially answered, is when you initially watched this film, you said obviously you're not you haven't seen too many movies and not a big fan of many of the films released in this time period. What was your initial reaction to seeing a movie like this? And have you also gone back and seen because of this, maybe, if you've enjoyed this film, has that enticed you to go watch other movies from this era?
Okay, well, to answer the first question there, what did I think of it initially? I was totally blown away by how much I really just enjoyed it on an entertainment level, by how I was amazed at how much was actually there, how much was going on. I didn't expect it to be as layered as it was. So that was my initial reaction. I was totally shocked that it was as good as it was. Did that directly lead me to watch more films of this era? I mean, not necessarily specifically, but when I do watch movies from this time frame now, I enjoy them a lot more. Like, I can get into that era of filmmaking a lot easier. A couple examples, I mean, maybe it's a little bit later on in the time frame here, but I watched a little bit more Alfred Hitchcock, and I think I've enjoyed that more. There's a couple other movies that are older that that my girlfriend enjoys that I've gone back and watched and found sort of a deeper level of appreciation for of the style of filmmaking at this point. There's a certain earnestness, or at least it comes across that way to me in films of this time frame. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be, going back and watching a lot of classics, but yeah, I have more appreciation for sure. What about you? What's your level of interest in this era of Hollywood?
I mean, like yourself. I mean, you're not exposed to a lot of this. I think more movies from the 60s is where I've spent more of my time, going back, like the 40s and the 50s. Not so much, but that's something I kind of want to rectify moving forward, whether it's through this podcast or just on my own. So I'm glad we really did this. I am interested, but I do have to be very picky. Because, I can get through a movie and I'll watch it if the story is good. But if the story and the dialogue is not good, and if it's forced dialogue, like I've been hinting at throughout some scenes, and I'm sure there are many, many, I'd say the bulk of the movies, that's where rare antiquities come from. Finding those gems in there that don't have that mistake. But if the bulk of them are just like forced, stilted dialough, which is unnatural, I can't. And if the story is not engaging, I'm done. I won't be able to get through it.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, let's kind of move into our final thoughts. So, what are your final thoughts on Sunset Boulevard, Harry? Is this a recommend, and is this a rare antiquity?
I was like yourself on your first watch of this movie as you just explained earlier, I was surprised at how much I did enjoy myself despite the movie still having some problems. As I talked about, the dialogue, anything to do away from Norma Desmond herself, I really had a problem with. But any of the scenes between Joe and Norma, and then Norma herself, I was completely fascinated. It's great to see not only a woman of age, but just a woman even in that era in the 50s being the star of the show. And that was very refreshing to see, quite surprising to see too. And I thought she did a great job. I thought the movie did a great job at exploring some of those themes that are still relevant today, which we talked about, people aging, women aging, respecting this, for the Hollywood system, respecting the stars that have come and gone. Do older people have a place in today's society? Or are they has-beens? I mean, these are topics that are relevant today. Not just in Hollywood, just in life. So I did enjoy that. I was quite surprised at that and the play of the ego and the id. And you had the ominous feeling as we talked about. I liked some of that setup. And, she was kind of a little bit of a crazy character. Is she psychotic, borderline psychotic? Is she just depressed? Is she just full of herself with the ego and vanity? And then there's the topics of vanity as we talked about, what it can do to you. So I enjoyed all of those concepts. And I thought, you could take any one of them and explore it in depth here. So there are some layers. So I did appreciate that. But again, some of the dialogue, some of the acting, some of those the C and D storylines with the car, those repo men, terrible. Didn't like Betty at all. Terrible. Joe and Betty, terrible. But I know that was necessary to get them out of the house to, cause some jealousy and some tension. So, but overall, yes, definitely a recommend. And I would say it's a rare antiquity because going back to this era, it's hard to find movies that I think, a lot of people can get into. And I think this movie's place in pop culture too definitely warrants it to get the stamp of recognition as a rare antiquity. But it's not so amazing that it's just it's a blowout recommendation. It's a good recommendation. It's a good movie to watch. It's not the best movie I've ever seen or anywhere close to it, but definitely a surprise watch, and I do recommend it. And it is a rare antiquity.
Do you think it holds up for modern audiences?
Depending on the audience, I would say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I do because, we touched on it. The way it's filmed, it doesn't make you think that it's so old, and the character is so interesting. But the problem is you may, millennials today probably won't even give it a chance. 2 minutes in, they'll just forget about it. They're on their phones anyways, or they'll just go, we'll watch reality TV or some other bullshit crap out there. But yeah, I'd say for people who really appreciate a movie and willing to give it a chance, they can get through it. Just the first 10, 15 minutes and maybe very, it's a little tricky. Yeah. After that, then I think you'll be engaged to the end.
I agree. I think from you're right when you say it kind of depends on the audience. As far as films from this time period go, it's pretty accessible, but it's still a film from this time period. Yeah. Like if you want to watch Citizen Kane, for example, which is for whatever reason, often hailed as the greatest motion picture of all time, it's not an accessible movie. It's not easy to watch. It's not easy to get into for all of its, technical wins. It's tough. This is not it's not a slog to watch this. But as far as my thoughts, obviously I've given it away. I'm a big fan of this movie. I was totally blown away the first time I've watched it. I think I've watched it 3 or 4 times in my life now, and it's one of those movies that for me kind of reveals more bits and pieces about itself every time I watch it. That little detail with the boom mic when she's sitting in the studio there is not something I'd ever picked up on before. So yeah, for me, it's a recommend. If you're a fan of films of this era, you're gonna dig this show. If you don't have a lot of exposure to films of this era, but you want to give it a try, check out something from the black and white days of Hollywood, I think this is an excellent place to start. So yeah, recommendation for me. Loved, as you said. Gloria Swanson is a force of nature here. She's spectacular. That character of Norma Desmond is so engrossing, so unsettling, yet so human. It's great. The character is great, and her portrayal of it is fantastic. I'm a little more forgiving of the character of Joe and of William Holden. I thought his performance works because he doesn't stand up to her because he can't. So he has to kind of be who he is in order for it to work, in my opinion. So I thought he was good. And this I think gets the rare antiquity stamp for me. No doubt about it, for sure.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear.
Yeah. So I think that wraps up Sunset Boulevard. Harry, what is in store for us next time?
Well, sir, sometimes the gods smile upon you, my friend. Next week for our milestone 20th episode, can't believe we're there, but we're there, even though, yeah, not much of a milestone, but a milestone nevertheless, we will be talking and analyzing the horror cult classic, William Shatner's Kingdom of the Spiders.
Awesome. Kingdom of the Spiders.
Yes.
Oh man, what year is that made?
That's the 70s. That's in the 70s.
70s. Okay, so post. Okay, yeah, that should be. Well, hey, there is no other man to usher in our milestone episode than William Shatner himself. There's
no, and I had that. I know the funny thing is I had that planned even before you told me about Sunset Boulevard, and here we are talking about Shatner throughout this episode, right? So it's kind of funny. It just naturally happened that way. Destined.
Mind you, we could be talking about painting the deck, and William Shatner would probably come up in conversation. So
yeah, probably.
That's probably not a huge stretch, but no, I'm looking forward to that one. That'll be
Have you seen that
a
one
gas.
before?
No, I've never seen it. No.
Okay, so yeah, so that'll be interesting.
Have you seen it? Have you seen it before?
Long time ago. So I'm looking forward to seeing it again.
Yeah,
I only remember a few scenes from it, so I know what it's generally about. But yeah, I'm looking forward to sinking my teeth into this one again.
Well, let's. Hey, man,
you're either going to end up with arachnophobia or Shatnerphobia. I'm not sure. Well, what's the end result? We'll see.
I hope it's not a cross of the two, because that could be a frightening new beast. Sharachnophobia?
Regardless, I'm looking forward to it.
Now, pop your popcorn. That'll be a good one.
All right, man. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a good one. We'll see you on the next one, buddy.
All right, you too.